What's up, guys? It's your boys Taylor and Taylor coming back at you with another episode of the Empirical Scouting Podcast. We wrapped up our talks on quarterback position, at least until the combine happens. So we're going to turn our attention to the defensive side of the ball. If you haven't listened to those episodes, I would highly recommend you listening to them. It gives you our thoughts and opinions on some of these top quarterbacks coming up in this year's draft. So then we already did arguably the most important position on offense. So we're going to turn our attention to arguably the most important position on defense, especially when it comes to the NFL draft, and that is going to be the edge position. We have our top 4 edge rushers in this year's class, at least as it sits pre-combine. So we're going to waste no time and dive right in. So we are going to start with your edge one. He is Jared Verse. He's listed at 6'4", 260 pounds. He wasn't even rated coming out of high school in Pennsylvania. First found himself at the University of Albany in New York for 2 seasons before finding his way down to Florida State. In those 2 seasons, he recorded 89 tackles, 29.5 tackles for a loss, 18 sacks, 3 passes defended, 2 fumble recoveries, and a forced fumble. He's had a heck of a college career, traveling all the way up from Albany down to Florida State. So Taylor, let's hear exactly what an NFL team is looking for in your edge one of Jared Verse.
They're getting a pretty polished pass rusher that, truthfully, in my opinion, has improved. And we'll hit on kind of, I guess, the context of last year versus this year. But just going through this guy's profile, we'll start with this quick clip I have here from the LSU game. And, you know, we've talked about this clip. It's not something you're going to notice in the box score ever until you watch the film back and you watch him and you realize what exactly happened here. So you look at Jared Verse up here on the screen, and you just watch his play out. He's not making this tackle. He's not making a sack or anything like that. But if you just watch him, you know, you see Jaden Daniels takes off, and Jared Verse just gets on his horse in pursuit. And this guy is, you know, he's hitting – Jaden Daniels hit like 22 miles per hour or something like that running on the season. Like, he's got 4.4-ish, 4.5-ish speed, and Jared Verse was going to probably catch him if he didn't have his teammate dive by his feet. So the guy's just a freak athlete all around. But on top of that, you know, he's got a great first step. He can rush from the 2-point stance to 3-point stance. He can rush from all over the line. They moved him around a bunch. He has no problem converting speed to power. He's got a pass rush plan. Like, he comes ready and he knows exactly how he's going to attack from snap to snap, which is something not every pass rusher has coming out. And then on top of all this, to me, the biggest improvement he made this year from last year was that last year I felt like he kind of got bullied in the run game a little bit. I thought there was times where he would get pushed back or he just wasn't playing the run as much. And then this year, I didn't see that as often. I saw a guy that was playing strong against the run, playing within his scheme for his teammates, which is great to see, you know, even though it's not showing up in the box score. And he was overall playing just stronger and anchoring himself against linemen, which I love to see. Now, you know, kind of some of the negatives. He isn't the super bendy guy that you're going to see, you know, around the corner, which, you know, that's a trait a lot of people do look for nowadays in edges, but it isn't indicative of, you know, not having elite bend doesn't mean you're not going to be successful. The other thing is that this was my biggest gripe with him personally, is that there's snaps where he gets engaged and he uses his hands great initially, and he gets a little bit of separation or something like that, and then he drops his hands while he's trying to, you know, bend or something like that. And the lineman is allowed to re-engage. And I would just love to see him develop or work on the, you know, the technique of keeping his hands active and keeping the lineman from re-engaging him so he can stay free and, you know, keep making big plays. But yes, he is my edge one overall. I think he's well worth the first round pick. My pro comp for him is Josh Allen, the Kentucky Jaguars edge rusher, not the quarterback. they were similar height, similar weight. They kind of play the same style to me. Josh Allen was a little bit more of like an actual off-ball linebacker at Kentucky than Verse was, but just overall their play style is similar. Josh Allen's not the bendiest guy out there, but he's set to get a huge payday this offseason.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, especially if they don't tag him, but they're probably going to tag him and try to work out an extension from there. Yeah, no, it is. But so we know about Versus athleticism. We see it on tape, but do you think he's a guy that more so relies on that athleticism? Or I'm guessing not, because I see it under your positives, but does he have a pass rush plan? Like, what is his pass rush plan? Does he have a bag of pass rush moves? Or is he just going, hey, I'm more athletic and faster and stronger than you, and I'm just going to beat you naturally?
He's definitely not just relying on the athleticism. He has a pretty deep bag of moves that he can go to. And he's definitely he has technique. He's not coming with, I'm just going to go straight through you, although he does do that at times. He's not coming with, I'm just going to try to run right by you around the corner. He knows what he's doing, and he knows that, he wants to come with he wants to go either outside and set up the tackle to where the tackle keeps, thinking, okay, he's going outside. And then the tackle will overset on a play, and then that's when he dips inside. There's other examples too, which I will show you here. This is a good one against Florida, where we see he's lined up right here, and he's actually going to stunt on this play. So, which means he's going to, instead of going directly straight, he's going to go around this way. And if you watch, he goes inside, and it's really subtle, but he flashes that inside arm to the guard, or he flashes his outside arm inside to the guard. So it forces the guard to think, okay, he's going inside. And as soon as the guard reacts to that inside arm, he just hits a spin move quick, and he's free. It's not a sack, but this kind of play here, he has intent. He knows what he's doing. He's coming with this plan in place already. He's not just, falling into doing this kind of move by chance.
He clearly he won that rep.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. It's just, the quarterback checks down, and anyways, on a stunt, like, that's not his responsibility to be the guy that's collapsing the pocket on a stunt. Truthfully, the stunt's designed to get, I think that's Braden Fisk. The stunts are designed for that guy to come free, or it's designed for Verse to get a free rush, which he doesn't get a free rush. So, but regardless,
if he is with the plan, if the outside wide receiver, if the fake screened wide receiver isn't wide open, that might be a sack at the end of the day.
Yeah. So overall, Verse definitely does come with a plan. He's got a good, array of pass rush moves to get himself free. The swim and the bull are good. The chop, he's got good hand fighting with the chop. I love his stab, which it's kind of exactly how it sounds. You just take the hand, the arm, whatever, and you just go straight into the lineman's chest. So he's so strong with it, and he comes with such good, core strength and such, that it works really well for him. And so this guy is, to me, by far edge one of this class. By far for me, yeah, it's not even close.
I was surprised, yeah, because usually it's him and most likely the edge two here coming up that are the 1-2, and they're pretty much flip flopping for a lot of people. My one question though is, he obviously could have been arguably edge one, probably not edge one, but probably edge two at the worst last year at this time. But he opted to come back to Florida State, I'm guessing, to try to win a national championship, because there wasn't really much room to improve his draft stock except to be that edge one, which in your case he is. Do you think, at the end of the day, seeing where he's at, assuming he's getting drafted at edge one, do you think that was a positive or negative decision for him to skip the draft last year?
It's probably going to end up being a negative, in the sense that he's going to be drafted lower, most likely, unless, you never know with the draft. But it seems like his floor or ceiling. I don't know which one it might be, but it seems like Atlanta really was interested in him at 8 last year. We're not sure if he had any other teams higher than Atlanta interested, and we're not sure if Atlanta would actually have pulled the trigger on him over like Bijan or something.
Yeah.
So it sounds like he may get taken lower, especially because it's become a debate between him and Turner. But I do actually think it was an overall positive because I think he got better. I think he became a better player and he's more ready to contribute from day one. Which I guess there's, people that out there that will view that.
It's a short term versus long term. I mean, short term, he's going to lose a little bit of money and lose a little bit of draft stock potentially. We'll never know if that's actually the case, but he potentially is going to lose some money. But in the long run, he's going to be a better NFL player, and he'll get that second contract. That super max, top 5 edge rusher type thing potentially, of course, versus being really raw and still like a team coming up into his like fourth, especially his 5th year option, probably franchise tagging him and then just going, hey, have you learned? He's already a step ahead of that. So he has a little bit of more leeway where, year 2, year 3, he's like, hey, I'm already a top 5 guy. Like, I want to get paid like a top 5 guy.
So really my biggest thing with it would be, I guess, the age question or age issue. He's coming into the league nearly 24 rather than nearly 23. So, people do get kind of caught up on age often with these prospects. I'm not sure it matters as much for an edge as it would for like a running back or quarterback to me. That said, I do, weigh age in all my gradings for every prospect, every position. But that's kind of like the biggest negative of it is that, okay, he's coming in a year later. So is there the higher floor, but is the ceiling still here or is it just here now,
Yeah, and people get enamored with the younger guys, like, oh, they'll hit a higher ceiling, and it's not always the case. This guy is going to be very polished coming in as well. So last question about Jerry Verse is, we just went over his strengths and weaknesses, and so what kind of, real quickly, like a scheme or even a team fit would be your most ideal, where he can step on day one and be that immediate contributor that you put down?
I think he can go anywhere. I don't say that about players often. I don't say that about players lightly. I think Verse can play within pretty much any scheme you want him to play in. I think he's athletic enough to play as an outside linebacker in a 3-4. I think he's strong enough to maybe gain some weight if you want him to play like a 5 tech in a 3-4, but I think that's kind of wasting his abilities. And then,
I would agree. He's not going to get big enough for that.
Yeah, and he's easily fits a 4-3, 6 to 9 tech role. But you look at it, Tennessee could use him, Atlanta, Chicago. The Jets are loaded there right now, so they could skip Minnesota. But Minnesota is probably looking at something else for the draft this year. But he fits pretty much any scheme, and I think you could find a good role for him at any NFL team right now.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely take him for the Falcons, and barring what we do at quarterback. So we'll see what happens to him coming this April. But we're going to transition over to our edge 2 of this year's class, and that is going to be the aforementioned Dallas Turner out of Alabama. He's listed at 6'4", 252 pounds. Typical Alabama edge rusher. He was a consensus 5-star top 20 overall recruit coming out of powerhouse St. Thomas Aquinas down in Florida. In his 3 seasons at Alabama, he recorded 120 tackles, 32.5 tackles for a loss, 22.5 sacks, a pass defended, 2 fumbles recovered, and 2 fumbles forced. A kid that's had his eye on the NFL probably since day one that he stepped on a football field, and probably was told he's going to make it to the NFL soon after that. Let's hear some of his strengths and weaknesses.
So for me personally, Turner is so much more about what he could potentially turn into than what he is currently. And that's not to say he's a bad player currently. Like, he is definitely a player that can contribute right away. He's very athletic. He's a smooth athlete, and he's going to win off the line of scrimmage. Now, on top of that, he also does have some good, anchoring to him. And he plays the run tougher than you might think. Like Alabama put these guys in such weird spots this year, or well, in general, since they brought in, I want to say Al Golden was their coordinator for the last couple of years, and we
Yeah,
saw
it's
with
not.
Roy.
This isn't the first time that we've seen an Alabama edge rusher in a weird spot.
Yeah, but looking at Turner, he plays much tougher against the run than you might think. But Anderson had that reputation last year, like that he played the run hard, and Turner doesn't really carry that same reputation. But you look at him here, and this is a fun rep to watch, like a guy play the run that way. He doesn't necessarily make the tackle all the way or anything like that, but he makes this play. This play,
I would disagree that it's a fun
know,
rep to watch, personally, for other reasons.
Well, some of us, can put away the bias for a minute.
Yeah, I know. It's fun. It's fun if you're not cheering for Georgia in that situation, which unfortunately I was.
But I mean, he works through a chip, which is not easy. This back's chipping down on him, and it's almost kind of in a blind spot, but he's got the side eye almost on it. So he pushes this back or wing back or whatever, whoever number 6 is for Georgia. And this guy goes flying back, and then he works through the tackle with a nice little rip. So he plays the run pretty well. And then this was his, shining moment of pass rush for me. He's up here on the edge, and this long arm is just a gorgeous long arm to collapse the pocket and get a sack. But this is also kind of transitions into like what my negative of it is of him. And I'm not sure if it's a scheme thing or if it is him. And I kind of think it might be a little bit of both. He really relied on that long arm or kind of bending with a long arm or stab move along the edge to get his pressures. And you don't love to see that. He did pull out other moves. Like I've seen him attempt spin moves and stuff, but really the long arm is like what he went to a lot.
Yeah. And real quickly, before you keep going, do you want to explain exactly what the long arm is, just real quick?
So it's essentially, to me, how I know it, how I always label it. Everybody kind of goes at football with different terminology. The long arm is for someone that is rushing from a defensive end or edge. They're taking their inside arm and they're sticking it into the chest of the lineman, and they're essentially keeping their arm stretched out while leaning, so the lineman is not able to touch them, and then they just keep pushing, going around the corner and kind of making a circle or semicircle towards the quarterback. That, or you're just straight up pushing the lineman straight back, which happens as well. And so Turner really relied on that a lot in my eyes. He really wanted to keep the lineman off of him and just kind of use his bend and strength. And like I said, I'm not sure if it's a scheme thing or what, because I saw his teammates not just rely on one move. So it's hard to tell.
So what you alluded to earlier when you first getting introduced to Dallas Turner is, would you say he's a little bit more on the opposite end of the spectrum from Jared Verse, as far as Jared Verse is coming in a little bit older, a little bit more polished, has a little bit deeper bag of pass rush moves, while Dallas Turner is going to be younger. He could have that higher ceiling, we don't know, but he's not nearly as polished, and just you don't really. It's more of the unknown with Dallas Turner, that he's going to be relying on that athleticism rather than what you've already seen.
To a degree, I would say that's true. I like Dallas Turner is not this. He's not so raw that he's like Marcus Davenport a few years ago when he was coming out was a guy. I just feel like I remember everyone being like, he's a really raw pass rusher that has all these tools and could be developed. And then last year, maybe like Yaya Diaby. He wasn't a first round pick or anything, obviously, but
no.
Diaby was that guy that was like, everyone's like, he's really raw and you could develop him. He's really athletic. Turner's not that raw, so don't put that out in the world. But he's definitely nowhere near as polished or a finished product as Verse. But he's, as you can see with the age thing, he's coming in a few years younger.
Yeah. And that's what the thing is the excitement of, you have guys probably similar athleticism scores, and one's going to be a year and a half younger. You would think, the trade off with that is that he hasn't shown all the polishedness as a Jared Verse, for instance. So teams could get very enamored with the athleticism and the age and take a chance on what he could be rather than what we've seen. And again, like you said, he's not, it's not like a total unknown. We've seen him dominate. We saw him dominate his freshman year, true freshman, walking in. I mean, only obviously because I'm a Georgia fan. I watched him dominate Georgia as a true freshman, and that was scary things coming through. And I don't necessarily think I was scared as much, if that makes sense, as Dallas Turner as the years went on, as we were that freshman year. But I mean, he's definitely dominated. One of those things you mentioned though also was like, why do you think is a scheme fit, or the scheme in general for the defense of dropping Dallas Turner back in coverage? Because it's a pattern we've seen with Will Anderson as well. Now, Will Anderson took it without saying much, and we saw following that Michigan game. I don't think Dallas Turner was very happy about being asked to drop back in coverage so much. So, do you think Alabama's scheme was just they wanted their edge rushers, especially their athletic freaks, most likely top 10 picks in the NFL draft at the edge position, dropping back in coverage? Why do you think that was?
Yeah, I think it's just the scheme, and I think they didn't want to get too fancy with it. From what I could tell, or at least what I think, it looks like they ran a 3-4 for the most part, or variations of a 3-4, and they kind of stuck to like the true essence of it, where these guys were playing on the edge for like Turner, Anderson, Braswell, etc. Were more so like linebackers than edge rushers, defensive ends, how we kind of think of them. And I think that kind of shows, like, if I recall correctly, Will Anderson last year, like, was invited to the combine as a linebacker rather than a defensive lineman.
I'm pretty sure he also took some reps at linebacker reps too.
He had to do like the coverage drills and so, like
flipping the hips and everything.
Stuff. Yeah. So that's my thought process with it, is that they just kind of stuck to this true essence of these guys are actually outside linebackers rather than edge rushers or pure edge rushers. Now, I think we've seen that in the NFL, they don't necessarily try to do that as much. It does happen. Like, you'll see TJ Watt's a good example. Like, you'll see TJ Watt have a coverage assignment every once in a while, but they do a lot better job at putting those guys into positions where they're going to be utilized in a way that's going to maximize their talents.
I mean, especially if you draft a guy top 10 or top 15, even say you're not going to ask him to drop back in coverage too often. You drafting him to get after the quarterback, and that's what you're going to ask him to do.
Yeah, and he's definitely going to do some coverage stuff in the NFL, like especially in a 3-4 scheme. But I don't think it's going to be the same way it was at Bama. So I don't think he's necessarily going to be unhappy or whatever. And he's got the athleticism to do some of that kind of stuff. There's clips out there of him sticking with like Brock Bowers and coverage for a little bit and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, he's got the athleticism for it. So final question. What kind of scheme? Is he another guy you can plug and play in pretty much anything, or are you going to have to draft him at a certain scheme, certain position to do a certain role in the NFL?
I'm not necessarily a fan of like taking him for anything. Now that said, like, I think he can kind of fit both a 4-3-3-4. But there's a certain spectrum of alignments that I would prefer to see him in. Like, whereas Verse, Verse, we see line up everywhere from like a zero tech to a wide 9 and make, rush a passer, and he's effective all over the place doing that. I don't want to see Dallas Turner lining up in a zero tech or a 3 tech. I want to see Dallas Turner using his speed and athleticism and burst, kind of the 6 to 9 range, where he's really coming off the edge and making pressure that way. So yeah, you want to draft him in a 3-4, you can make it work. A 4-3, you can make it work. I would prefer to see him more in like a 3-4-ish type of system. But I think he can work in either one, truthfully.
Sounds good to me. So we'll move over to our edge 3 of this year's class, Laitu Latu. He's listed at 6'5", 265 pounds. He's had an interesting yet pretty dominating college career. He was a consensus four-star recruit in high school coming out of Washington, who actually started his career with the Washington Huskies, where he clearly shined as a freshman. However, in that sophomore year, he did suffer an extremely serious neck injury, which kind of led him to medically retire for a little bit until finally he decided, or he got word that he could actually play, decided to transfer over to UCLA, where he played for 2.5 seasons, totaling 100 tackles, 35 and a half tackles for loss, 23 sacks, 2 interceptions, 4 passes defended, a fumble recovery, and 5 forced fumbles. So Taylor, Latu has had a pretty wild career thus far, and let's hear some of your thoughts on his potential successes and potential failures in the NFL.
So Latu is, to me, a guy that you're going to draft just because he is good at football. Like, that's the only way I can describe that. This guy works his butt off. He's really taken to becoming a good pass rusher as like a craft, which it is, but not everyone really takes it to that extreme almost. When you watch Latu, you notice a few things. The guy gives crazy effort almost every play. He is constantly coming at linemen with some kind of pass rush move. Like, it is insane how deep his bag of tricks is. So
Yeah,
to
well,
speak.
let's kind of dive into that because that was the first thing that I think anyone who's kind of followed draft Twitter ever since the Senior Bowl has come up is just people have talked about that he has a deeper pass rush bag than plenty of pass rushers in the NFL. And he's still a college kid. So what
Yeah.
exactly makes him so special, and like what kind of moves can he display?
So you can see it kind of in these clips that we have going here. A second ago, we just saw a clip where he had kind of this, long arm hump move type of situation. You've seen clips already on this video. He pulls out swim moves pretty often, and he's pretty good at it. I've seen him do a shuck move, which a shuck move is pretty simple. It's just, taking the hands and swiping to keep the lineman's hands from engaging with you. He comes at you with a spin move, which we all saw the clip from the Senior Bowl go viral with him with that spin. And he's done it in games and had success with it in games, which is important to note because just because you do something in a one-on-one at the Senior Bowl doesn't mean you're doing it in the games. And then he comes at people with a good little shoulder dip as well, and he can bend. So it is, and it's not just all those moves I named. It's also the fact that those moves are good baselines for more. So, you've seen him do a long arm or a hump move or whatever, which they kind of can transition to each other. But that also shows, this guy could pull off a stab move pretty easy, which most edge rushers at this level can. He comes at you with a shoulder dip, can also set up a ghost move with that if you really want to. The shuck move, it's just kind of, the two hands, but you can also work it off of that and become a chop. And then on top of all that, you can sequence these moves together and use them as counters. So if you're coming, off the edge, trying to bend the edge and use a shuck or a chop or something like that, and the lineman oversets and is ready for that, you can sequence this into a spin on the inside for a counter and try to get free. And then if that doesn't work, you can do something else. So that is really where it comes from. And it's impressive. Like, this guy, in the time I've been like really looking at edge rushers, like in scouting and such, he's genuinely one of my favorite edge rushers to have ever watched. Like, it
And that's
is.
what kind of makes him so special is
Yeah.
being able to, use those counters and not have to set it up necessarily. And it's more of like a read and react situation where it's like he has this pass rush plan in place, and if he gets blocked, he has a counter to it, but it's not necessarily like he's planning it, because you see some guys who will, like, I remember, I want to say it was Vic Beasley when he finally decided to start trying to learn more pass rush moves and just being the overly athletic guy. Like, he would try to set up a spin move, and he would go to the outside and spin, and the tackle is just standing in front of him. Like, what are you doing? Like, I could see this coming from a mile away. And you see that ever so often where these guys will want to set up moves and try to have like a counter set up for a guy, but they're not really. It's not a read and react situation, so it's kind of readable. But in this situation, Latu seems to kind of guy that is like, hey, I have such pass rush knowledge that you can do whatever you want, and I can, on split second, just be able to figure out a different way to beat you. And that's just, one of those things where not many pass rushers, even in the NFL, have that. They rely on certain moves. And if you have a guy who can just read and react to the tackle, that tackle is going to be on skates more often than not.
Yeah. And so just to like really hit on Latu's profile, you mentioned the neck thing. That is my 110% my biggest thing with him. People are concerned about the athleticism, and that's fair. And we'll talk about that in a second. But the neck thing is what is really driving his grade to a second round grade for me. If he didn't have this neck issue at all, and like it was just his all this, but without it, this guy is a first round prospect for me, a first round grade for me, maybe even my edge one, truthfully. Like you can't ignore, sometimes you can't ignore how good at football guys are. Yeah. Even if they are not the most athletic. And we've seen that. Or if they don't have the most, the A+ traits. But
yeah,
I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not going to have any information on his medicals from the combine or anything like that. But if they come back clean, I wouldn't hesitate to pick this guy top 20 at all.
Yeah. It's just in the back of your mind, you still have to work in. You can get all the clean bill of health you want, but that neck injury still happened, and your body's not going to fully 100% recover from something like that. Like, there's still a chance that he gets hit a certain way, or he lays a certain kind of hit, and he could be injured again. And that's just something that you have to factor in. Like, is his upside and is his play worth that risk? And it's fair. I don't think anyone should discredit it and just pretend it didn't happen, because it happened, and you have to weigh that into the the cost benefit of drafting him with such a high draft pick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. And I just want to hit on this note real quick. The top positive bullet for me, that 26.2 win rate and then 40% on true pass sets. It is by far the top the top rate in this class by far. This guy won his reps way more than anybody else.
I was going to say winning 40% of the time is a lot.
On true pass sets, which is, they take out screens and spikes and like play actions on those. But 40% on a true pass set versus for Dallas Turner, 32.5, which is actually very, very good on its own right. And then Jared Verse, I didn't have it on here, but his was like 28-ish range. So that's just the context there. Like 40% is insane.
And obviously they're playing different competition. I mean, all Power 5 for the most part, but some, better than others. And but even then, at the end of the day,
Latu saw two guys that are considered first round picks by a lot of people. Talise Fuaga at Oregon State, and then Jordan Morgan at Arizona. So he played decent players.
Actually, yeah, no, he did. I'm not discrediting it at all. I was just saying, like, obviously that 40%, to really compare it, they have to play the exact same teams. But to be a 40% versus like a 28, like you said, that's a huge difference, especially for him being your edge 3 versus your edge 1. So final question for Latu is he a guy that can fit into any scheme, or what if you were drafting him, what kind of scheme would you be, wanting to insert him into?
I'm willing to play this guy in any scheme. You saw him at UCLA be used in all these different alignments all over the line. He's a big guy at 6'4", 260. He can play anywhere you want him to play. And I think he's got the athleticism to play off the edge too, if needed. I think he can fit anywhere you want him.
I can see it. I mean, he definitely has that heart too. He's going to be willing to step on the field at any position you ask him to, and he's going to do the job as to the best of his ability. But obviously, if you're going to draft him that high, you want him to get after the pass rusher, especially with that 40% on true pass sets. So I would definitely, I love Latu. watching him, like you said, it's fun. It's just seeing all these counters, and it's like a chess match out there that he just continuously wins.
Yeah.
Just hopefully that neck's okay.
I want to take 2 seconds here and explain the
Okay.
Joey Bosa thing
Okay. Go
verbally,
for it.
because I know I'll probably get crap for it. So Joey Bosa, if you go look at his mock draftable profile or whatever, his profile from the combine for his athletic testing, Joey Bosa was a freak athlete at Ohio State, and we all knew that. However, his actual testing was pretty average in almost everything except for the short agilities. So like the shuttle and the 3-cone and such. But his like 40 time, his 20 time, his everything else was pretty average. And I think Latu is going to test pretty similar. Like I think Latu is going to test really, really well in agilities, but he's not going to have that long speed, just like Bosa. And then they're very similar height, weight, length as each other were coming out. And on top of that, Latu's super polished the way Bosa was. So
that's the main thing
just
with
wanted to
Joey
explain
Bosa.
that.
He was ready. Joey Bosa was ready to step on the field day one and be a top edge rusher in the league. And Latu, all healthy, he seems like well on his way to do the same thing. I don't know. I think we both can agree that some of the testing, obviously, they have to do all of it, but some of the testing at the combine, especially for edge rushers, like I don't really care if you can run a 40 at like 4.5. 4.6 even. Like it's that short area because you're not running far. I mean, you could, like we saw Jared Verse earlier with that Jaden Daniels run. Like we want you to be able to do that. That'd be nice. But that's not why we're drafting you. We're not drafting you to run down the field.
Situation,
Exactly. Like we're not drafting you to be able to run down the quarterback 30, 40 yards downfield. Like if that happens, we have bigger issues to worry about. We're asking you to, in a box, beat a tackle or beat a double team and get to the quarterback. And I don't care if you can run a 4.5. If you're running a 4.7, 4.8, but you're in the top, in like a 99, 98 percentile in the shuttle or the 10-yard split. It's like, okay, now we're thinking about something because that's really that area that you're looking for, at least for me. And that's why, we saw guys in the past get shot up boards because they can run a fast 40. But some of the other things weren't as impressive, and I don't know, it just doesn't translate to me. Running a 40 especially for a defensive lineman. Same thing, obviously, with interior guys, but that's a whole nother story. But we'll transition to that edge 4 that I was just alluding to. Another Alabama guy, and Chris Braswell. He's listed at 6'3" and 255 pounds. He's another Bama edge rusher, former consensus 5-star, top 25 overall recruit, coming out of Baltimore, and a 3-year contributor to Alabama. In those 3 years, he did put up 75 tackles, 15.5 tackles per loss, 10.5 sacks, 1 interception, a pass defended, and 4 forced fumbles. He is actually listed on Bruce Feldman's freaks list, having to ran over 21 miles per hour on the radar. So he's a former running mate of Will Anderson Jr. and Dallas Turner, obviously, but he's kind of been more in the shadows than being that main guy. So let's hear exactly what you're looking at Chris Braswell.
I was kind of shocked, honestly, with Braswell. I didn't come in thinking I was going to like him as much as I ended up liking him. And on top of that, I watched like a game or two and I didn't like him as much as I ended up liking him. And then, I really, really cracked down and like paid attention and watched a couple more games. And I realized this guy he didn't get the attention and he didn't necessarily make the flashiest plays at Alabama, but kind of like Dallas Turner, he was playing within the scheme a lot. And he showed a lot of great traits that could transition really well and really fast if he lands at the right spot. You can see it. I didn't take clips, so I don't have any clips going in the background here. But, I mean, first of all, his hip flexibility is crazy. So, like, he's got bend, which is great to see. But this bullet point down here is the biggest thing for me. He doesn't necessarily win every single time he pulls out one of those moves I've listed, but he pulls them out, and he actually pulls them out like well. Like he executes the move, and he's showing that he's gonna he understands the move. So that's why I'm notating it. It's just like, he doesn't always pull it out and it leads to a win, which is more so how I give these guys their icons. But he shows a really deep bag on tape, and he's got this raw power that he can convert from speed really easily, like really fast, like 1 or 2 steps type of fast. So basically, like, this guy is just an all-around freak athlete that has shown he's working on that technique and getting better at that technique. It's just not necessarily there yet. Now, the negatives are that his first step, you'll notice often he kind of reacts late to the snap. So sometimes he explodes off of it, gets a great get off, and then other times it's like kind of a half second, and then he reacts. So he's losing kind of that initial gain he could get there. There's other times where he's trying to pull out these moves on when he's rushing passer. The chop is a good example of it. His chop move is his go-to move. That's like his most refined one. He's very, very good at it. But there's times where like he tries to pull it out and he doesn't have the space. You know, he tries to pull it out late, or he's much closer to the tackle than he realizes, and the tackle's able to land the punch before it hits, the chop hits. So he's kind of got to work on that spatial awareness. You know, hey, this tackle's much closer than I'm thinking. I can't really do a chop here. I need to go with like the rip or something else. But overall, like, this guy has such a high ceiling, it looks like, that you put him in a situation where he's coached by, you know, I'm not sure off the top of my head, like, a good spot, but, you know, for instance, like if he goes to New York and he's getting like Robert Saleh's one-on-one attention, like, which I don't think that's going to happen, but something like that, like, this guy could develop really fast and become like a really big impact type of player, truthfully.
Yeah. And I mean, I got to make the comparisons, but, you know, he played alongside Will Anderson and Dallas Turner. Doesn't seem like he's the kind of athletic freak as either one of those guys are, and nor did he put up the type of stats that they did. So, like, in comparison, like, why is he getting looked at, especially being your edge 4, when, you know, he's played alongside guys that are getting drafted so high, but he just doesn't have, you know, those kind of stats. He hasn't put it up, you know. I don't know. As a guy watching Alabama, like, I'm not looking for Chris Braswell, and he's just kind of like another guy out there. But
yeah,
you kind of alluded to it, and I'll, you know, mention it again. It could be, and I'm sure it's what you're going to say, is it's more like the scheme fit, because I'm seeing it at Georgia, you know, ever since Kirby Smart came over and he learned from Nick Saban, obviously with Alabama, and they don't care how good you are at, you know, rushing a passer, covering a guy, dropping back in coverage. They don't care. You're fitting them, that what they want to do on defense. So, like, Chris Braswell could very well be a guy who can win consistently off the edge, or, you know, figure out ways to drop back in coverage as well as win off the edge. But he wasn't asked to do that. He could have been asked to fill gaps for other guys, and that was just his role in that defense. And so he might not have been able to put, you know, those stats up and some of that game film up. So why is he, you know, in short, your edge 4 compared to those two Alabama rushers that are most likely, both of them, drafted in the top 10?
Well, so Will Anderson, he was behind, you know, Will Anderson for all those years, for one. And as we've seen already in the NFL, like, Will Anderson is a top tier edge. And on top of that, like, that guy was a great leader. Like, and sometimes when there's like ties between talent, I'm not saying this was true. Sometimes when there's ties between talent, like, coaches will play the guys that are like clearly the hard worker, better leader types, because it's one of those things where having, you know, the leader on the field is just better than having a guy that's, you know, a little bit more quiet or reserved. And then on top of that, though, you know, I kind of make the comparison in a roundabout way. Like, Trayvon Walker at UGA wasn't the guy there at all. He was playing a role, but he was this athletic freak, and he came and he showed how much of an athletic freak he was, and then he ended up getting taken first overall, even though he was never the main guy on that squad. Now, I'm not saying Braswell is going to jump Turner or anything like that, but it's kind of one of those situations where sometimes these guys come in and they're rated so highly as recruits and such because of their athletic potential and their ceiling, and it takes some time. They're a little bit more raw, and they got to put it all together. And Will Anderson obviously was elite prospect in his own right, and then Dallas Turner is very, very good. Dallas Turner, put it together a little bit faster maybe than Braswell or whatever it was. But the reason overall that he's ended up being my edge 4 is because you see how athletic he is, you see how flexible he is, and you see that he's got more technique that he's working on and refining, and it's just deeper than you see with a lot of guys. You'll see someone like, I off the top of my head, but like Nolan Smith last year. And I loved Nolan Smith, like top 10 for me last year. But Nolan Smith didn't necessarily come with showing all these different pass rush moves that Braswell's shown already to me. So something just kind of like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the good thing about it is when you look at him and like you see senior, and first thing I think of is like, entering at 24, maybe a redshirt senior, all that. But no, like he's a 3-year contributor at Alabama, never redshirted, and he's not even going to be 23. So to me, Chris Braswell seems like one of those older prospects that's like he is who he is. But in reality, he was fitting a scheme, being asked to do what he needed to do to help win. He did that, and he's still somewhat young. He was on the field for all 3 years, pretty much as a starter. So it's not like he's a new guy either. And he, like you said, to you, he's shown glimpses of actually being the guy, rather than just being like, well, what if he was? What if we gave him the chances? It's like, no, we've seen it just in very small stints.
Yeah. So, and I made the Trayvon Walker comparison, but the other like one that's a classic Bama one is like he was, it was a logjam at Bama at that position for while he was there. We've seen it happen for years at Alabama at various positions, specifically like running back. We've seen years where Najee was the third string running back or whatever, like as a sophomore and junior, because they had other guys that were just older and there longer and were very good running backs in their own right. And then Najee played a year and was a first round pick, regardless of how his NFL career is gone. But it's just that logjam that happens at Bama. And it sucks, but also like this guy's going to make it. And from there, like it's up to him what his, earning potential really is.
Yeah. And you're not the only guy I've seen because somewhat high on him. I've been seeing him mocked in day 2 pretty consistently. And I mean, I guess once you get to that point, if you need an edge rusher, odds are, a Bama guy is going to be a guy who performs at the next level. Let's just say it that way. But that's going to wrap it up for today's episode of our top 4 edge rushers in this year's class. Overall, it's a pretty nasty top 4. We'll be seeing them come off the board pretty quickly in April. But tune in next episode where we'll give you thoughts and our opinions on a few more edge rushers in this year's class. Go ahead and give us a follow on all social media platforms at empirical_scout. We've been putting out some good content, specifically on TikTok and Twitter. That adds a little bit more context and some videos and more about what we speak about in these videos. If you're listening to us on Spotify, go ahead and give us a 5-star rating. And if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe at the buttons below. For Taylor, I'm Taylor, and we'll see you next time. Peace.